It is when record keeping got into place, when it was really put into place, roughly about 1880, and then only in Western Europe, United States, major cities. Essentially, no data south of the equator, and no data in the Far East or anywhere else. So it's not very much. Detailed weather information for most of the planet only dates to about 1950. In other words, good, solid, hard numerical data, for instance, for South America, really only exists to about 1950. Satellite and other overview information back to the 1960s. Sunspot information, sunspots have been observed, and in 1848 is when the French scientists first observed sunspots and began to understand that there was a cyclical relationship going on there, that sunspots kind of came and went. But in terms of actually understanding, so there is good recorded data from about 1848, 1850. Estimates as to temperature, rainfall, etc. prior to 1880, and this is important to understand in a lot of discussions, is largely anecdotal evidence and guesses based on secondary examinations. Now, scientific examinations, you can look at tree rings, for instance, and see that some rings are wider, some rings are narrower. If the rings are wider, perhaps that indicates more rain. Well, how much more rain? Well, a lot, but a lot, things like a lot or a little or more than this year or more than that year, those are not, it's not like saying, 27.5 inches of rain fell this year. It's not hard data. It's usable data at a certain level, but it's not detailed, hard, factual information. A lot of good journals exist, especially of travelers, explorers who say, they're living here in, my great-grandfather came across from Norway in 1898, and they moved to Canada, and then they kind of wandered into the United States because there was no one keeping track of the border, I guess, and some law existed that if you wandered into the United States and lived there for a couple of years, you became a citizen. So I'm a citizen. I was born here. My great-grandfather? I'm not too sure. But, he could be writing in his journal, it's, May 1st, it's 1899, the coldest winter that anyone remembers in this area, 3 feet of snow. That's good, usable information. That's nice, but it's not hard, factual data. It doesn't really give us a lot to work with in terms of scientific, usable data. So anecdotal evidence. Again, it's just another instance of this. You can talk about tornadoes. You can sometimes get some information about tornadoes, hurricanes, other storms. Estimates of how many people died in a particular storm, where the water was, things like that. It's usable information, but it's not the kind of scientific data you really need to build good models on. Nice. Tornado. That tornado is 1.2 miles wide at its base. And that lightning is, so you can see the width of that bolt of lightning hitting the ground in relation, if the bottom of that tornado is 1.2 miles wide, that's a big piece of electricity hitting something. Hard statistical data. Modern weather stations and hobbyists now provide more data on a daily basis to the National Weather Service than existed cumulatively before 1950. A little picture of me, my weather station. The map down below here is actually, this is the weather from this morning. This is the weather satellite weather station. This is Hurricane Rick that's off the coast of Mexico that's wandering around. But like all Pacific hurricanes, will end up in the middle of the ocean, and you'll never see that it happens. But that's each one of those little dots is a weather station. Now, if I zoomed in on any one of those areas, you would see literally thousands of weather stations just like mine across the United States and Canada, all providing data, all providing information. Now, what about the Bible? Weather-related biblical accounts. Particularly, there's a couple. We could mention a few, but Genesis chapter 6. The first one that is significant is the flood. We remember the story of the flood. We remember that Noah was told by God to build an ark, the animals, all of the things that happened there, and then we started 50 days of rain. And you have the flood. You have all of this inundation of the land, where the entire, not only the land was flooded, but the topography of the earth was changed. I don't know if any, you don't have to agree with me. It's okay. I'm one of those people who hold to a concept called Pangea, one continent. That prior to the flood, the earth existed basically in one continent, and that part of the cataclysm of the flood was the rapid separation of the continents, and the separation of the oceans, etc. Things like that went on. So you have, so one of the most important things that happened early on in the history of the planet, the flood, is a completely weather-related phenomena. Now the question with weather then becomes, is something like this: was the flood a miracle? Was the flood something that God had to do something special to cause to happen? Well, that's an interesting question. Probably there are some people who say that prior to the flood it had never really rained. That mankind didn't really know what rain was all about. And so it's an interesting question, but probably, other than God allowing the flood, the rain to occur and to begin and to inundate the world, no, it was just the natural course of, once God allowed it to happen, the rain kept coming. It continued and ran its natural course, which was to inundate the world. Now, the separation of the continents, all of the power related to that, obviously God is doing that. There's a little bit more. There are natural phenomena there with the cracks and the tectonic plates and things, but it's also not it's probably more or less a natural occurrence, other than the things going on there. Let me go to the storm of the Sea of Galilee in Luke chapter 8. Look at Luke chapter 8, because this is a fascinating story. And it's really an early introduction of Christ to the apostles. Now, remember, the apostles, for the most part, these were men of this region. These are men of Galilee. Peter, James, John, Andrew, they ran fishing businesses. These were experienced sailors on the Sea of Galilee. Sea of Galilee, the largest freshwater body of water in the Middle East. It is also the lowest freshwater body of water on the planet. It is a body of water below sea level, about 850 feet below sea level. It's about 23 miles from north to south, about 13 miles wide. And these are, and it's surrounded, because of where it is, by these large cliffs and mountains. And you do get these very dangerous storms, because the wind will blow off the Arbel cliffs down the sea, blowing across the Sea of Galilee. If you could get to the bottom of the Sea of Galilee, you would probably be recovering ancient shipping vessels and fishing vessels that have sunk there for centuries. One of them not long ago was actually about 10 years ago. One was dug up in the mud on the northern coast of the Sea of Galilee. One of our seminary students who works in the movie studios just did a mock-up model, a very nice model. It's in our library now at the front desk if you get a chance to come by and see it, of that boat. This is a famous picture by Rembrandt, and it actually depicts the size and the kind of boat very accurately. But these are men who were experienced sailors. They knew these storms. They knew what was going on. In Luke 8:22, that came about in those days that he and his disciples got into a boat. He said to them, "Let's go to the other side of the lake." And so this is the other side of the lake. Depending on where they were, this is probably an hour and a half voyage at best. We're not talking about a voyage of days crossing the Lake of Sea of Galilee. And they launched out, but as they were sailing, he fell asleep, and a fierce gale of wind descended upon the lake, probably off of the west side, the Arbel Cliffs, down and across the sea. And they began to be swamped, and they were in danger. And they said to him, "They woke him, Master, Master, we're perishing." And being aroused, he rebuked the wind, the surging waves, and they stopped and became calm. Obviously a miracle. Obviously the wind and the waves obeying his voice.